hear me okay? I asked that to a group a couple weeks ago, and I said, can you hear me okay? And they said, yeah. And then at the end, I heard one lady turn to the other and say, I didn't hear a word he said. But at least the other lady said, I didn't either. Okay, they must not have heard when I asked. Okay, who's been to my previous presentations? Okay, all right, a couple have come back. All right, so thank you. Now I know there's a lot of competition today because there's euchre and there's crochet club. Now you've got a choice between playing euchre or learning some of the mysteries of the universe. So I know it's a tough choice. Thanks for being here. My name is Joe Fahey. No, I'm not from Janesville, and I'm not from Fitchburg. I'm from Belleville. So those are three different breeds of cat. Recently retired after 45 years of corporate life, and the last 20 years of which I was involved in, I was responsible for international marketing for a Japanese company. And so I traveled the world and had some really great experiences. And so when I retired, I had all these pictures, and I thought, started going through them, and I know my kids don't want them. And so they started falling into buckets, and I thought, you know what, I bet if I put these pictures together and wrap them around some really boring stories, I can get some people to show up. You did. So this is what you're in for. And this doesn't fall in that bucket because this is a vacation I took a year ago. Oh. So unfortunately, I had to pay for this one. And it breaks my heart and my wallet, but it was a bucket list item. And I have 4 different 1-hour presentations on that. I do pyramids, I do Tut's Tomb and Valley of the Kings. Tomorrow in Belleville I'm doing temples along the Nile, temples of the gods actually. And then the 4th one is about the Nile itself. The Nile is a great story, and so I do 4 different presentations on this trip. This is probably my favorite because I kind of do explain some of the mysteries of the universe. So I find it interesting anyway. So thanks for being here. So I always start out with let's talk about geography, and you all know where Egypt is, so we don't have to talk about that. But today we're going to be in Giza, which is it's really a suburb of Cairo, and literally Cairo comes right up to the pyramids. And we stayed at a hotel in Cairo, and they said, do you want pyramid view or parking lot view? And pyramid view was a lot more expensive, as you can imagine, but it goes right up to the pyramid. Okay, who's been there? Okay, all right, so we have a few. So, all right, that's good, but no corrections here, okay? Keep it to yourself. All right, so it's outside of Cairo, and it's on the west bank of the Nile. And that's important because in ancient Egypt, the west bank of the Nile is for the dead, and the east bank of the Nile is for the living. So now, oddly enough, our hotel was on the west bank. I don't know if I should be worried about that or not, but anyway. So we're going to be in Giza, which is in Lower Egypt, not Upper Egypt. Lower Egypt because the Nile flows north. So that's why it's considered Lower Egypt. Now, I always spend time talking about the Egyptian timeline because this is really important. It's only 3,000 years. So give or take a few decades. This, I like this because it gives you a visual of the extent of the Egyptian civilization. So it lasted about 3,000 years. There were 33 dynasties within that 3,000 years. And so you notice that there are three major periods: Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. And the black lines in between are kind of what we would consider dark ages, where there were wars, or always wars, but the civilization maybe took a step backwards. It was not a good time. So the growth was during the Old, Middle, and New Kingdom. Now, you'll see that the New Kingdom, that was Akhenaten, Tut, Ramses. That was really the height of the Egyptian civilization. And after that, it was all downhill. They were constantly being conquered. And one of the reasons was because of the Nile and the fertility that came with the Nile, the resources. So there's the Libyans and the Persians and the Greeks and then the Romans. Now, the Greeks, you know who that is. It's Alexander the Great. He conquered the Persians in Egypt, and so he left his good friend Ptolemy in charge, and so that was the Ptolemaic range, and there were like 13 different Ptolemies, the last being Cleopatra. And then we know what happened with Cleopatra and the Romans. So the Romans got in there, and it was really not much. It really wasn't the empire anymore. So anyway, this gives you an idea. And what we're talking about today is the Old Kingdom. This is the period where they built pyramids. Now in the New Kingdom, that's where they buried the pharaohs underground. That was the Valley of the Kings. And I have a separate presentation about the Valley of the Kings. So again, we're talking about the Old Kingdom, and this is around 2500 BC. So here are the three pyramids. This is the Great Pyramid, and that particular pyramid is the only remaining of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So Khufu's pyramid is the Great Pyramid. It's 480 feet high. Simple math, that make it 48 stories. Khafre is his son, and so, well, Dad had a pyramid, so I have to have a pyramid. Now, his is only 450 feet high, so it's 30 feet shorter. So he was being a good son by not trying to outdo his dad. However, he was clever enough to build it on a higher piece of ground, and so technically it is higher than his dad's pyramid. So that's Khafre. And then Khafre's son, Menkaure, his pyramid is only 200 feet high. So it's less than half. And I suspect that by that point they were so tired of building pyramids that he could only squeeze out a couple hundred feet. In front of these are pyramids of the queens, and they're quite small, and they are in ill repair. So really, these are the three pyramids that we're talking about today. I found this, and this really tells the story. So Khufu's pyramid was completed in 2560 BCE, or BC. It was the tallest man-made structure in the world until, and I cannot remember the name of this church in France. And that was in the 1300s. And after 75 years, it collapsed. So we're not even going to count that. That's cheating and poor workmanship. So it was the tallest building in the world until the Washington Monument. Now that's the pyramid is 480 feet. The Washington Monument is 555 feet high. So it's hard to imagine for 4,400 years It was the biggest man-made structure. It's incredible. Then in here, Eiffel Tower and Chrysler Building and Empire State Building, it gives you a sense of comparison. But still, such an impressive record. But we need to start with fake news. And there's never a shortage of fake news out there. Anybody see the movie Napoleon? Okay. Okay. So, in the movie Napoleon, Napoleon did fight in Egypt. And so they show a scene where he's blowing up the pyramid. This is Khafre's pyramid. That didn't happen. No, that just didn't happen. So that's fake news. Has anybody seen this? This is the side of Menkare's pyramid you don't ever see. This is the back side. So we're on the tour bus and we're driving around the pyramids, and I see this. And so I asked our tour guide, who was usually dependable, but he failed me on this one. I said, what is that? And he goes, oh, well, yeah, during World War II, they used it for target practice. Oh, no, look at that. That is not target practice. Okay, so the real story is in the 12th century, Saladin, who was from Iran, was conquering that part of the world. And of course, conquerors never hang around. They're not administrators, they're conquerors. So you gotta go conquer someplace else. So he left his son in charge. Ooh, that's a big mistake. You always gotta watch out for that next generation. So his son had the brilliant idea. First of all, were a devout Muslim. And so pyramids, I mean, everything in Egypt, that was, false idols. And so he would every day look at these pyramids and go, these are dedicated to false gods and to false idols. We have got to get rid of them. So he tried to tear it down. Well, that's 2 years worth of work. So finally he figured out that tearing down a pyramid is as much work as putting one up. So he finally gave up. So and here's the rubble from it. So that was from some ill-fated attempt in the 12th century. And then finally in the movie, they show this scene where Napoleon is looking at the Sphinx, and that's from a famous painting from that era, and that did happen. However, there is a rumor that Napoleon's troops shot off the nose of the Sphinx, and that's not true. So we'll get back to that later, but all of this stuff is fake news. So next, now you may not be aware, but this is audience participation. Okay, you don't get to just sit there. So I have a really difficult question for you, not including the base. How many sides to a pyramid? Okay, we have a 4.
Yeah.
Okay, is that consensus? 4? Well, no, not counting the bottom. No. I hate to break it to you, but the answer is, it depends. This is a picture taken in 1940. It's the first time someone flew above the pyramid and took a picture. And it's the first time they realized that each side of the pyramid is concave. You can't see it from the ground. And it's each side, and it's perfect. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows what the purpose of making these just slightly concave. So when I say the answer is it depends, in this case, there are 8 sides to the Great Pyramid. All right, now, a little background on why the pyramids. And it's all about the afterlife. Now, the ancient Egyptians were just fixated with the afterlife. And so much so that you know, most great, I'm going to call it an empire, they were very big on conquering and colonialism and expanding their territory. Not so much the Egyptians. Yeah, they went down to Nubia, yeah, they over to Sudan, yeah. But by and large, they didn't do that a lot. Not like the Romans, not like the Greeks, not like some of the other famous cultures. And part of it was because it was important to die in Egypt. They had so many rules on death. It was absolutely incredible. So then they had the Book of the Dead, and the Book of the Dead was like written over 2,000 years, and it became huge with all these rules on death and dying. And so this is part of the basis of Book of the Dead, where Anubis, the god Anubis, who is god of death, did the first mummification, and this is of the god Osiris. Mummification was big for several thousand years in Egypt, and is preserving the body for the afterlife. Because, I mean, obviously you need your body in the afterlife. And so there are a lot of rules that went with mummification, and once you died, remove all the organs, and the process took about 90 days. Okay? But they left the heart in the mummy, and I'll get to that in a bit. So these are canoptic jars, and for the pharaohs, they had to save all the organs in the canoptic jars because they're going to need them. And so the baboon is for the lungs, and the falcon is for the intestines, and the goddess, I don't recall which goddess it is, that's for the liver, and then the jackal is for the stomach. So we've accounted for all the major organs except the brain. Well, they took the brain out and threw it away. I guess you don't need a brain in the afterlife. I kind of like mine. I think that's kind of disappointing to not have a brain in the afterlife, but okay. So that's where your main organs are, and your heart stays in the mummy. Now, the next step, according to the Book of the Dead, is that you have to pass the test of Osiris. And it starts out with 42 judges. It's really complicated dying. Now, each of the 42 judges asks you a question, and you have to be able to pass each question. Now, I just happen to have all 42 questions that they asked. I'm not gonna go through all this, but some of these are kind of interesting. I've not stolen grain. Okay. I've not purloined offerings. I've not carried food away. Obviously, they didn't have buffets back then. I've not uttered curses. I've not made none to weep, or I have made none to weep. And then there's I have not been an eavesdropper. Well, that was before party lines. And then I've not been, I would have a real tough time passing all 42 questions. I have not pried into others' matters. Those are some pretty tough questions. So after passing the 42 questions, if you go through that gauntlet and answer all the questions correctly, then you come to see Anubis. And Anubis is going to weigh your heart. That's why your heart has to stay in the mummy. So he weighs your heart versus a feather. And if your heart is heavier than a feather, obviously you just lied about the 42 questions. And your heart is then fed to this interesting creature, which is a combination crocodile, leopard, and hippopotamus. There's some pretty creative thinking going on here. And so that's it's pretty hard to get to the the field of reeds is where you want to go in the afterlife, and apparently it's pretty tough. Now, this particular scene shows up a lot in tombs. It's pretty famous, the Judgment of Osiris. However, at one point they decided, it's hard to draw 42 judges, so they cut it down to 12. So now it's 12 judges that you have to pass. So now there's some interesting analogies that have come from the Judgment of Osiris. I find it interesting that the scales of justice look a lot like the scales of Anubis when he's weighing your heart. So, did it come from that? I don't know, but I think it's an interesting analogy. And then there's the issue of the 12 judges. And it just happens to coincide with the number 12 of a jury. Now, I find this picture interesting because, we're all told that we get to be judged by a jury of our peers. And in this case, as long as you're a white male between the age of 45 and 55, it's true. Other than that, you're in trouble. So, and then there's one more element of the afterlife. And, your parents always told you can't take it with you. Not true, because the pharaohs did. And this is King Tut's stash. And they were buried with all this treasure that they would need in the afterlife. There are 4,500 items in Tut's tomb. There's 130 canes, 80 shoes, 2 chariots, everything that you would need in the afterlife. So yes, you can take it with you. Okay, so now, why Giza? And what happened is they've been building pyramids before. So the concept of pyramids was not new, but they were building, most of the time they were built on sand, right? Well, that doesn't work too well. So finally they figured out we need a stable base, so the pharaoh told his construction manager, go find a place where I can, that's solid, that I can build my Great Pyramid. So this is the Giza Plateau, and you can see that there's a drawing obviously, but it is a raised plateau, and this is bedrock. So very solid, pretty flat, not totally flat, but it's close to the Nile, which is very important. So he chose the Giza Plateau. So one thing that we were told when we were there is that the pyramids, the 3 pyramids, are in the same alignment as the stars in Orion's belt. And so I put a picture of Orion's belt to do a comparison. And when you draw a line through them, you see that the middle star is not exactly in alignment, and that's also true for the pyramids. They had incredible understanding of astronomy for the time, and they had great ability as far as measurement and placement. And I have some more examples, but they are placed in pretty much exact alignment with Orion's belt. Now, here's what the Great Pyramid looks like close up. Okay, again, class participation. All right, the next question is, how many blocks in the Great Pyramid? Now, I have all day, so I'm waiting. Come on, I don't hear any numbers. I heard a lot. That's not a number.
Thousands.
Must be at least 1 million.
Okay, we have thousands, we have 1 million. The answer is 2.3 million.
Oh.
2.3 million blocks. Now, the deeper we get into this, the more astonishing this is going to be. So just on the surface, it's astonishing. And it's going to get nothing but more incredible. And these are not huge, or they are huge, excuse me. So I took it from a different angle, and even though that these are all blocks of different sizes, it's pretty much a straight line. You know, you don't have to get too far away to see the perfection that they have in putting this together. And this is just to give you an idea of size, of scale. These blocks are huge, absolutely huge. And it just blows your mind that they were able to do this, and it gives you so much respect for their capabilities. All right, so the next is how. And this is where the mysteries of the universe come to play, because we all know that they were built by aliens. That is the only way that they get 2.3 million blocks in a perfect pyramid. Well, okay, some people don't believe this. So for those who don't believe it, it is a multi-step process, like a lot of steps. And as I go through this, I always think about, and then what? I mean, there's so much work that had to be done. So, okay, they decided on the Giza Plateau. Well, the Giza Plateau isn't perfectly flat. And if you're going to build the world's tallest building for 4,500 years, it probably better be flat. So they picked an area, and it was sloping at about 6 degrees. So they had to come in and flatten it. Well, that's a mighty tall task before you even start. So, okay, here's another quiz. And people are not doing too well so far. What is the one item in nature that is perfectly flat?
Water.
Yes, water. So what they did was they built a canal from the Nile to the construction site. And then they built, now this is a major canal, and I'll explain that one later. But then there's a minor canal that goes all the way around the pyramid. And they flooded the construction site, and whatever stuck above the water, they took out. And just drop the water, until it's perfectly flat with the surface of the water. Brilliant. That's a lot of work, you know. If you just had a level, that wouldn't be such a big issue. But they were great with the tools that were available, which is not much. So they used water to level this to within. Now, the base of the pyramid covers 13 acres, all right? They leveled it to within 1 inch. Astounding. Absolutely astounding. So then, okay, there's placement. The pyramids point to absolute north, south, east, west. Now, they didn't have iPhones. They didn't have compasses. How'd they do that? Correct. So on the equinox, put a stick in the ground, and you trace the arc, and then you bisect the arc, and that's true north. So that's how they were able to determine the corners of the pyramids. All right, now they need materials. So this is how they cut granite. Now, keep in mind, the tools that they had were copper chisels and wooden mallets. Didn't have bronze, they had copper. Copper is very soft. And so cutting granite. So what they had to do was have fire on top of where they wanted to burn, douse it with cold water to create a stress fracture and take it from there. Now, the good news is there isn't much granite. Only inside the tomb is there granite. Most of this, I mean, everything else is limestone, which is softer, but it's still stone. So now the question is, so how do you cut limestone? And the answer is by drilling a lot of holes. Okay, easy. You just take your power drill and you know? I don't think so. So, yeah. And then what? Well, what they had to do in order to drill those holes, they had a bow drill. And what that is, it's like a bow and arrow, only the string is wrapped around a piece of wood, and you go back and forth, and it just spins it back and forth. And then you throw sand on, and that's the abrasive to drill a hole. Now, they're not drilling a complete hole because that's too much material. So what they would do is they, use something hollow and create a core and then knock out the core. That goes faster. So now you've got all these cored out holes. So now what do? Well, so now these are wood. And so you put wood, 3 pieces of wood in each one. Now, what does that do? And they have to be of a certain style, let's put it that way, where it's thicker at the bottom, and basically you're ramming down the middle part, and then you pour water on it. Now this is cedar. There's no cedar in Egypt. This stuff came from the Middle East. So you pour water on it and it expands. And so now that wood is tight inside the hole. And what you do is you take your wooden mallet and you bop that, and it puts pressure, and when these holes are so close together, it forms enough pressure to crack the stone. Here's a kind of a graphic presentation. But you see where there's already a crack, and now they're putting in wedges, and again, putting water on it, and then hitting it with a wooden mallet to add additional pressure until the whole block cracks. And then, I mean, this is kind of representative of how big these blocks were, that they were able to separate from the bedrock. Okay, so then what? Well, they had to drag them. Now, they didn't have draft animals. It took a bunch of guys. Now, this particular scene comes from a tomb, but it demonstrates, first of all, this is a statue, and it's sitting on a wooden sled. And this guy is pouring some kind of lubricant. I don't know if it's sand or water. Not sure. And I like this guy's job. It's his job to give him something to drink. So he must be the supervisor. And then you've got lots of soldiers up here who are really supervising. But anyway, it gives you some kind of a sense of it's just manpower that's moving these blocks on a sled. So we were in the Cairo Museum, which is being replaced right now by the Grand Egyptian Museum. But anyway, in the Cairo Museum, this is one of the original sleds for hauling blocks. That's what we're talking about. It doesn't look very easy, but that's the best they had. We were on a boat going up the Nile, and at one point our guide says, "Okay, look over here. This is a quarry that was right on the Nile." Now, at that point, we were about 200-300 miles from Giza. So what they would do is cut the stones, get them to a barge, go downstream 200 or 300 miles, and offload them at the construction site. This is a lot of, keep thinking, 2.3 million, okay? 2.3 million. Okay, so what's next? So I mentioned to you they built a canal from the Nile to the construction site. So here they say ancient port, but they would then offload them and haul them to the construction site. Okay, so then what? Well, you gotta put them in place. And so how do you get them up there? Well, as the blocks start going up, they used a sand ramp. All right. Now, first of all, to pull them up, they actually had developed a rudimentary pulley system, where these guys are gaining efficiency because of the semi-pulley, and then the other guys were just plain pulling. And here's the sled. And so they're pulling it up this sand ramp. Now, what they figured out from previous failed pyramids is that the pyramid has to be 51 degrees. That's the number. And so they worked at 51 degrees. And the ramp was at 11 degrees. Now, yeah, I went to high school. I took geometry. So I tried to figure out, all right, so if they built this sand ramp all the way to the top, how long would that ramp have to be? And according to my geometry, which I'm sure is accurate, the sand ramp would have to be 2/3 of a mile long. And it would have to be 45 stories high. Now that's a lot of sand. And that's just not gonna happen. So they kind of had a limit as to how high they were gonna take that sand ramp. So once they get up to that limit, so now what? Well, so what they did was this is what this brown indicates is the pyramid, the stones didn't go all the way to the edge. They stopped short. And what they built basically a ramp that spiraled around the pyramid to get up to the top. So the pyramid itself was a ramp. It was just unfinished at that point. And notice they didn't do the corners because you have to get around the corner. So then once you finish at the top, then you go back and you fill in all these places that you didn't finish that were the ramp. So it's kind of self-contained. It's absolutely brilliant. So as we were driving by, I don't know if this is my imagination or if this is, but if you kind of squint, you can kind of see where the stone is a different color. That's because when they finished off where the ramps were, those are from a different quarry. And so you can kind of see where the ramps were, the spiral ramp going up the pyramid. Really impressive. So once all that's completed, you're done, right? Wrong. That's a trick question. Wrong. You've got a lot of work to do. Because, I mean, who wants an ugly pyramid that looks like this? What you want is a smooth finish. And so next, they had to put capstone cover over the entire pyramid. This is white limestone, whereas this is just basic limestone. This is white limestone, and it was cut to fit right on top of the existing blocks and make it totally smooth on the outside. Now, this is a picture from the bent pyramid, which was built before. But this is the cover, the capstone is pretty much still intact. So here's where the base is, and these are the stones that they had to put on top. And his picture kind of gives you an idea of, once again, size and scale. That's a lot of work. And so the result was not perfect, but pretty close to a smooth-sided pyramid that was brilliant white. Now what this doesn't show is there was a golden cap on top. And the point is that this represents Ra. Ra is the sun god. So anytime you would look at the pyramid, the golden cap would shine like the sun, and the white capstone would be like rays, white rays coming from the sun. Again, that's a lot of work for a nice effect, okay? But hey, it's good to be Pharaoh. So that's the how. Now this is Khufu's pyramid, and for those of you who went to see Napoleon, you're probably surprised to see that it wasn't blown up. But this is the only capstone that's remaining on either of the three pyramids. And the problem is that, okay, that was 4,500 years ago. And basically, people stole the white limestone for other building projects. And that's exactly what happened to the Colosseum. The Colosseum also had white capstone on it, and it's not there anymore. It was all stolen. So this is all that's left from all that work. So inside the pyramid, this is a diagram of what the inside looks like. So this is the entrance. You come down. There are three different chambers. There's the pharaoh, the queen, and they're not exactly sure what the purpose of that chamber was. But you come down and then you crawl up to get into the chamber. Now, they had learned from their previous mistakes, and to have an empty chamber with all these, a million stones on top of it, that's a real engineering problem. And so they put 5 huge pieces of granite with, I'm going to say, shock absorbers in between them. And then a cantilevered granite on top of it to kind of push the pressure off to the side. Very good engineering. Again, this is they learned from their mistakes, but it's held up. So they did a good job. So here's what it looks like on the inside. Now you can go in, and this is the stairway going up, and it's pretty tight. I did not go. I'm a little bit claustrophobic. It seemed like a little bit too much. I know one guy who went up, and he said, yeah, it was tight, and it was the air was really stale, and it was, I'd say 55 degrees outside. It was about 90 inside this is the chamber and this is the sarcophagus where Khufu was buried. So now this is the granite right there, and it's beautifully finished with granite, but there's nothing there. Now, one thing they told us is that every day they find something new in Egyptology and archaeology there. And with modern technology, it's helping them find stuff. The week after we got home, they announced that they found a huge void within the pyramid that is above the entrance. And the void is about the size of a 747 fuselage. And they don't know what it's for. They're guessing that maybe it's to reduce weight over the entrance. But and we'll never know, because the government does not allow them to. There's no messing with the pyramids or any of the really important archaeological digs. So it's there, don't know why. Now, obviously security is a big issue for the pharaoh. And so I have about a 1-minute video to explain the security system.
At the Great Pyramid, archaeologist Mark Lehner is checking out a clue that suggests the pharaoh relied on more than prayers and curses to ward off robbers. This is a small room just outside the king's chamber.
Here, Khufu's builders designed a line of defense against anyone who would enter the king's chamber had they got this far. These grooves and protrusions are not decorative. They are part of a very primitive machine.
Solid walls, some 80 meters thick, surround the chambers, leaving the passageways as the weak link. So at the king's chamber, workers carved out a set of grooves just outside the entrance and fitted 3 massive granite slabs, which workers would drop down once the king's mummy was safely inside. To block the entrance to the passageways below, they fitted 3 even bigger granite blocks to cut off access to the inner sanctum. Then they completely concealed the entrance under a seamless layer of limestone.
Unearthed, all new, Tuesdays at 10 on Science.
Brilliant. Didn't work, but it's brilliant. Brilliant engineering. Tut's tomb is the only pharaoh's tomb that they have found that was untouched. All the rest were stolen, broken into, and there's a long story behind that. But again, the 3 blocks on top, and then the 3 sliding down is again another example of just great engineering. Okay, so who built the pyramids? You know, we talk about where, we talk about how, we talk about why. So now it's who, and everybody knows that it was built by slaves, right? No, it wasn't slaves. It's farmers. And you know, it's a popular thought that okay, it was slaves were forced to do this, but there's logic behind this. Now, the logic goes back to the Nile, and the Nile is the source of all things. At the end of the day, everything evolves or revolves around the Nile. And in middle school, we all learned about the fact that the Nile floods, and it brings all this fertility to agriculture. So the timing of the flood is July to October. You see that it floods its banks. And then in November to February, the farmers are working the fields and sowing. And then March to June, they're harvesting. All right, in this period, they have nothing to do. Okay, you've got this huge labor force. Hey, how about building a pyramid? Now, don't know if they were conscribed or if they were volunteers. Don't know exactly how that worked, but they were compensated. They built a village for them a compound for them to live in. They had dorms and bakeries and breweries. a complete supply chain. There's documentation that they needed like 140 cattle a day and over 200 sheep a day to feed the workers. And so it was a system. And so they only worked like 4 months a year on the pyramid. And there are different theories on how long it took, whether 20, 30 years. But the fact is, it was built during Khufu's lifetime, while he was pharaoh. So, you know, this is time limited. And it's, okay, go back to the 2.3 million. They're working part-time. How many people were working on this? How much of the economy went into building of the pyramid? I mean, it's absolutely enormous. And just also notice in this picture, you've got, this is Khufu, this is Khafre's, and that's Menkare's, and in front of Khufu's is the Sphinx. So we'll come back to that. But when we were there, our guide pointed to this, and he said, there is the off-ramp. This is where the canal was. And here's the off-ramp for pulling stones off the barges and getting them up on the land and then over to the pyramid. So, you know, it's I don't know, it's just kind of impressive or striking that some of this stuff is still there. And you can clearly envision how that worked. So it's very impressive. Okay, speaking of the Sphinx, Sphinx is located pretty much in front of Khafre's pyramid. And it's made out of a single piece of stone. It's, what happened is, it's located in a quarry that was used for building material. And what they did was they just quarried around this huge block of stone and then made the Sphinx. So this angle gives you kind of a better view of how this was all bedrock, and they cut down and then made a project of creating the Sphinx. Now, his head had to be some outcropping. I mean, his head was attached, part of that single piece of stone. So, but it's very impressive, and you can see that different layers of stone they weather at a different rate. So it's not smooth. It's pretty jagged. And at one point they put a stone cap on his paws. But here's his tail as it comes up. Here's his rear paws. Very, very impressive structure. This is a kind of an artist's rendition of what they think it looked like. Now, I think there's maybe some license being taken here, but it gives you an idea of what it looked like. And here are the pyramids with the gold cap. That's accurate. I don't know if these obelisks were here, but one thing the Egyptians did was they painted their temples, they painted their statues in brilliant colors. Now, after 4,000 years of sun and sandblasting, there isn't much paint to be seen. But they're pretty sure that the headdress was painted. He had the cobra on the headband, had the fake beard, and this is the crook and the flail. You'd often see statues of the pharaohs holding the crook and the flail. So it gives you an idea of the majesty of what this probably looked like at one time. Now, going back to Napoleon and the fake news. Napoleon did not shoot off the nose of the Sphinx. Now, for those of you who are amateur Egyptologists, you know that when you see statues very often the nose is missing. Okay? Does anybody know why that is?
Erosion?
No. It's a form of revenge. In that, if there's a statue of somebody, odds are he's dead. Okay? And if he's dead, there's a good chance he may be in the afterlife. And if you cut off his nose, he probably can't breathe. So that would irritate him through all eternity that he can't breathe in the afterlife. So it's a good way to get revenge against someone he didn't particularly care for. And there'd be basically no repercussion, You can get away with it scot-free. Well, not all the time. In the 14th century, the Ottomans were, this is 14th century CE or AD, the Ottomans were in control of Egypt, and again, they were devout Muslim, and the governor, who was Ottoman, observed that the farmers were praying before the Sphinx for the annual flood. It didn't come every year, so they were praying that the flood would come. And, well, okay, this is praying before false idols, and this doesn't go well. So he ordered that the Sphinx nose be removed. And you know the part where I told you could usually get away with it? He was executed. That was a pretty serious crime. So it was in the 14th century by the Muslim governor who removed the nose of the Sphinx. And I just included this picture. I took this one thing. This is Mohammed, and it's just an incredible. He was a great tour guide. But I wanted. This is a temple that was right down by the water in front of Khafre's, right by the Sphinx. And so he's talking about the Sphinx. And just notice the masonry. Notice that the corners are cut into the stone, not two stones coming together. And this is granite. That's a lot of work to do that. And you have to do that with hammer stones. So it's just a point of craftsmanship that you just have to appreciate. So finally, my last point is pyramids by camel. Right? And so I have one last quiz. Right? This is a yes or a no. Who remembers going to the zoo and riding the camels in Madison? All right, we have some camel riders here. I found this picture from Henry Miley Zoo. Yeah, I went as a kid. And these are dromedaries with one hump. But back then they had Bactrians with the two. And my recollection from riding a camel was I was with my brother and they stuck us both between the hump. And it was a pretty tight fit. There isn't a lot of room between the humps on a camel. So there is a skill to getting up on a camel. Now, first of all, what you do is you come from the left and there's a stirrup. So you put your foot in the stirrup and you swing your leg around. Well, it doesn't take you long. You're going like this and you realize there's only one stirrup. You can search all you want, but there's that other stirrup isn't there. So you can see that you get on while the camel's down on its haunches. Oh, by the way, this is my wife. So she's the novice camel rider. So then they get up on their back legs first. And does anybody ever think about when you're riding a bike going over the handlebars? That's what it's like. Because you got to lean back as far as you can to keep from going over the handlebars of the camel. And so then he gets up on his front feet, and when you do, you scream as loud as you can. Okay? You have successfully gotten up on a camel. And so then here's how you dismount off a camel. Now, she did the side saddle style of dismount, which is more feminine, whereas a guy would just swing his leg around and use a stirrup. So there's the feminine and the masculine way of dismounting a camel. But the next time you go to see the pyramids, make sure you ride the camels. It's just a great way to experience Egypt, and you get a great photo op at the end. So thanks for spending an hour with me. And are there any questions that I can't answer?
What was the time frame between the Sphinx and the pyramids?
Okay, great question, because they're not exactly sure. Now, the Sphinx, they think was built either at the same time or maybe before Khafre's, which would be the second pyramid. They think, again, nobody knows for sure, but they think Khafre built it. And I was reading an article and I thought it was kind of funny. You look at the Sphinx and it doesn't look like much of anything. But people say, well, it looks like Khafre, or it looks like Khufu. Well, they're father and son, they both look the same. Come on. So it was about the same time as Khafre's. Now, keep in mind that father, son, son, I mean, they're just made bang, bang, bang. So that's all in that 2500 BC time period. Thanks for coming. Oh, wait. Oh, we have one.
All questions are good, right? Okay, so like when the capstone came off of that, the Great Pyramid, do they have rain there at all? I mean, limestone is really soft.
Okay, you're right. That is a great question, and that did cross my mind. Well, it really crossed my mind if you read the Bible. Some people do. They talk about in Exodus, they talk about the Egyptians having to make mud bricks out of mud and straw. And when I was there, I saw a huge pallet of mud bricks. Okay, it's made of mud. So, to your question, what happens when it rains? Well, the answer is it doesn't. This is the Sahara,
Yeah.
and our guide Mohammed told us that he's in his mid-40s. He only remembers showers 3 times in his life. North Africa all the way up to the Middle East, it's all desert. So, yeah, you would think that limestone would be problematic, but it's not. Anything else? Thanks for coming.
Thank you.